Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, mate, doing pretty well. It's obviously a pretty exciting time to jump on the podcast, given it's that time of year where we start being linked with players and obviously a few exciting transfers, well, one in particular to talk about. So it's it's a very optimistic time of the year, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is that now that we've had that news last night, our time about Carvalho, is it's not just a rumor. It's not just a like sort of like Philogene last window, even where we knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when, and the days would tick by, and you kind of go, we just need the club to announce it. So it was good to get that announcement, which means we can talk about it in a little bit with full excitement, no sort of trepidation in case things fall down or whatever. But look, we'll talk about all those off-field stories in just a little bit, but we'll talk on-field first with that draw with Birmingham in the FA Cup, which I sort of keep forgetting. I have to remind myself actually does mean we have another fixture as well against them next midweek. So maybe we'll couple the game review as well as preview thoughts on, we've got Leicester in the next round. If we get through, does that mean we're not as fussed about getting through now? Certainly for me, it seems that's sort of the way. But we'll talk the game itself first of all. A reasonably flat game on the whole, I would say, but highlighted by an awesome goal for Matty Jacob on his first start.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that all football clubs get extremely excited when they see one of their young gun unsung heroes perform well, and for him to get the goal, I think Racine touched on how Matty Jacob was a huge part of his plans in pre-season, and then obviously it didn't turn out that way with the injury. So, for him to get on the score sheet, I think that was, probably the only real talking point about the game, really. I mean, we rescued a point. Salvaged the draw, which, keeps us alive in the cup, which in many ways, I don't think that as fans you really care about the cups too much early on. I think unless you're playing one of the kind of the really big clubs and it's a nice kind of away day or something like that, it doesn't really hold as much weight. So great to see Matty Jacob score late in the piece. And realistically, the biggest takeaway that I can kind of find from it is that it gives Racine another opportunity to give minutes to these players who perhaps have been knocking on the door or haven't been given the chance so far to prove themselves. So I think many of them will be incredibly grateful that we did get through because it's another 90 minutes to impress.
Yeah, I think Sharp himself came out and said basically that he doesn't feel his fitness levels are up to starting a game at the moment. So for him in particular, it's actually a really good thing to have the replay next round, whichever it was going to be, because it gives him another chance to have a run out in a game that doesn't have as much weighing on it as a league fixture. So absolutely, you look at guys like Sharp, Vaughan as well, if he's going to go out on loan potentially. But I thought he, along with Jacob, were probably our standout players in that game, which is really interesting because I think, and it'd be good to get your view on it, because I've seen some people really praising Ali, for example, who I thought didn't have a great game, and others criticizing Vaughan, who I thought did have a good game. So in terms of those attacking players, and I think it was Racine after the game sort of said he didn't think some of the players took the chance that the game provided to them to sort of force their way into perhaps a league starting lineup. How did you see, I guess, those depth players and how they performed?
I'll start with Ali. I think that he, in the last couple of games, I feel like when he has come on in the league fixtures, he's looked really lively, and he really has kind of come on and played that busy bee role, like thrown himself about and really tried to affect the result. And I think that that to me shows great desire, and I still think that there's a pathway for him. And in this game in particular, I didn't think he was poor. I just didn't think that he did anything that really put himself in the shop window, which is really the result that that he's looking for. Like for Racine to be able to justify Ali going into a starting spot at the moment would be really difficult based on that performance. I don't think he was necessarily poor. I just don't think that in a fixture that he really needed to stand out. He definitely didn't do that. The kilo is another one for me that just there hasn't really been too many patches since since he signed where I've looked at him and thought, oh, we've really got a player. I think the championship kind of blurs into one when you think back, sort of 15, 20 fixtures ago. But there has been games where, I've thought that he has looked really good going forward. And when he's got the ball, the kind of trickery, the skill that he throws at defenders, does look to kind of create opportunity. So I have seen aspects of that. But as far as a complete player, it really just hasn't kind of hit the mark for me. And again, in this fixture, there was nothing about his game that really stood out or reached the heights that Rosenior would have been expecting to. So I think probably the question behind the question, what you were going to ask really is in the press conference when Rosenior spoke about people who hadn't done enough. I think realistically they were probably the two players in Ali and Kilo that I think he was alluding to, who he really kind of had a close eye on, and I don't think that either of them did enough to stand out. Harry Vaughan, however, I think was probably the pick of the bunch, and I think he's the one that it will be giving Rosenior the most headaches if the news to believe that there's potentially 5 outgoings. Whether Harry Vaughan goes out on loan or not will be the big question that I think will be plaguing the gaffer as he goes to bed at night at the moment.
Yeah, and I think for me, Lokilo, I think I've been reasonably consistent this season in saying I think he's been a good depth option where you if you saw him on the bench in a fixture, you'd be pretty happy to see him coming off the bench late in the game to run at defenders, but never struck me as somebody, like you said, that it's not as if he was a player sort of bursting into the starting 11 and sort of commanding a place. And I think the games that he's looked the best or the most effective in, he's been on the wing opposite Philogene. And I think in a way, his best role has almost been in sort of providing that width so that teams can't just double or triple up on Philogene. And so I'm trying to think, as you said, the game sort of blurred together, but I think it was probably the Rotherham game in particular where he put a few really good balls into the box that potentially ended up in goals. But again, that's sort of where you've got Philogene on the other wing bagging 2 goals himself, where it means that teams can't just focus on Philogene. And I think if it's to be believed that we're looking to bring another winger in, that role of playing that dangerous element on that other wing sort of evaporates for him. And interestingly, we did see, or I did hear some talk from Baz Cooper at the HDM in their 1904 podcast talking about potentially Lakila getting shipped out, I presume on loan. I don't think we're selling him after 6 months, but whether it's to give him a bit more game time and hopefully develop it either an English club or abroad, I don't know. But it was interesting to hear that he could potentially be one of those 5 going out, along with, you'd assume sort of Cynic, Ali, and maybe a couple of others as well. Doherty, I think, is now the interesting one. And actually, he's another one to mention for this game who, even though he only got 45 minutes, I actually thought looked really good, looked really sharp in that first half. There was one passage in particular where he made a really great run into the box, where I think the comment was that, we haven't seen that much from him in the championship, but was more familiar in his League One days. But he's one where, especially with Seri and Traore off at AFCON, it makes it really difficult to know whether we should ship him off, as I think was originally the plan, when we sort of need him here now for depth. And you look at, we were lucky with that Tyler Morton red getting overturned, but you kind of can't help but think, we were that close to basically being down to those bare bones, and you don't really want to risk that potentially happening again.
Yeah, the other thing that I would probably add to that, and I totally agree with you, is if, the championship or the league season is anything to go by, I think there's almost the trail of breadcrumbs being dropped by Rosenior at the moment, because Doherty has, featured in many of the recent league fixtures, not necessarily for large periods, but there does seem like there's a real impetus kind of being pushed to give him the chance to force his way into the squad. And so I think that probably speaks to me in the way that I think Rosenior does potentially view Doherty in the plans moving forward. Just because of the fact that he's persisted with him for so long post Doherty's injury as well. And obviously it's just you think about the positional role that Doherty plays. Like, it's really hard to make a case to say that Doherty starts over anyone in our midfield. And it's not that Doherty, I think, is a poor player. I do think that we've seen glimpses of Greg Doherty that, provide that he is championship caliber, albeit probably bottom half of the championship. I'd say, being generous, but certainly as a squad player, I think there is definitely still a role for him to play in the season moving forward. And I do feel that Liam Rosenior also sees things that way.
And then just as a final comment on this, I mean, we sort of already touched on it, but in terms of the replay and potentially Leicester in the next round, any thoughts on, any sort of care? You sort of already said that there's not a whole lot of focus on it at this stage, but, do we want to get through to play Leicester? Does it really matter at all? Do we think we could get past Leicester in the next round, or how do you see it?
I don't think that there's any way that we're going to look at it as a fixture that needs to be thrown, but I do think it will be seen as an opportunity to just give players that run out. I think, if anything, based on the injury news of Delap coming through, that Connolly probably now needs to be, protected. So I'd be surprised to see him feature in the game. I think that is probably the thing. As you mentioned, Sharp will need minutes. So there's a few kind of through lines and separate narratives going on, but I do think that it's not going to hold a huge importance other than to get those guys opportunity in the legs. And I think that Ali and Lakillo are probably the two that will be looking to respond the most, given the post-match conference from Rosenior.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's a great segue. We'll talk off-field news then as well now. What turned from a sort of a precautionary rest for Liam Delap? I was commenting in the chat the other day, I do find it funny. It's not that it happens all the time, but, you sometimes see these players get rested for a game and it's just, giving them a rest because they're a bit sore. They'll go in for a scan and all of a sudden it's, an 8 to 12 week injury, as is the case with Delap. And you kind of think it's not like he got smashed in the game in particular. It's not like he had to come off injured. So I always sort of wonder if they hadn't done the scan, if he would have just sort of muddled on through. But obviously you don't want to do any long-term damage to him. And it's terrible news for us in terms of the structural role that he plays in the side. But maybe a quick word on Delap first before we talk about the incomings.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And it's always frustrating as a fan to read the initial injury report and to hear, he got a knock, or like, what does a knock even mean? The level of knock, obviously has huge connotations for some, and then it's as simple as a bump.
You see Louis Coyle get knocks and he just plays the next week.
That's right. And so I think the big thing that is probably really difficult from an injury report is to talk about swelling. So when you say some kind of injury, obviously if it's a significant injury, usually the site is, incredibly swollen. And I think that also can be the case if you cop a cork or something like that, where swelling can be big and then greater, and then can be reduced really quick with ice. And I know, well, it sounds very sports scientist. We don't know what we're talking about here on the podcast, but it is those interesting ones. I agree that the seem innocuous. There doesn't really sound like there's a storyline behind it, because the player seems to be walking okay and moving fine, and it's just a rather small-sided thing. But then when you get the heartbreaking news that he's out for as long as what is expected, if we're talking the upper side of 2 months, that's a very long time to be without, one of the stars of the season, which is really difficult to stomach. So I can't remember if that was the initial question. I think I got caught up in the hype about classification of injuries, but really disappointed to hear that he will be out. And I do think that certainly, affirms how important the signing of Billy Sharp may prove to be.
Yeah, and also not just Billy Sharp, but the news that we got last night confirmed Fabio Carvalho joining on loan from Liverpool. It would have been maybe 3-4 weeks ago when I first saw that he was returning to Liverpool from Red Bull Leipzig. And I think I saw someone mention somewhere as very much an optimistic pipe dream suggestion of, hey, why don't we try and get him in? And it was quickly rubbished by people saying, he's just been playing Champions League. There's no chance he's dropping down to the Championship. It's, you're dreaming sort of thing. And even as recently as a week ago, when you're looking at the clubs linked to him, Southampton, Leeds, even I think Wolves had expressed interest in the Premier League. For him to be joining us over those clubs, I think, Tyler Morton was cited as a big influence on the decision. Obviously, Liam Rosenior as well. No doubt Seri as well had a hand in chatting to him from their time at Fulham together. But I saw on Twitter someone trying to kind of think of other examples of times that players have played in the group stage in the Champions League and then gone to the Championship in the same season. And I think the only one they could come up with was a centre-back for United who went to Ipswich or somewhere. So it's a very uncommon, unusual sort of signing in that sense, and just shows how monumental it could be and how much of an impact it could have on our season.
Absolutely. I think Rosenior, when he the first post-match conference, when he was talking about how excited he was about the link and he can't really talk about it, you always wonder how much to read into those things, purely because it's a manager trying to get the fans excited, and then if he turns around and said, "Oh, we had something in the pipeline, but it didn't happen," you're not really letting anyone down, because as pessimistic fans, you kind of think, well, until it's in writing, and you see the picture of the player holding the contract and a City shirt in front of him, you've just been let down too many times. And I think that was what was so interesting about this particular signing, was, as you said, the types of clubs that were also interested, and a player of that caliber. It's not like it was a rumoured interest. I think it was pretty clear, particularly Wolves. I actually thought that the deal had been completed with Wolves, based on some of the reporting. So to get that one over the line is a remarkable bit of business, and not just that. I think it shows the intent. It's another tick in the owners kind of book, because we look at Ajun when he comes out and says that he wants to back Rosenior, and you think, okay, like, let's see what that looks like. And then obviously the background work with Tan Kesler as well. They obviously do have a really clear negotiation strategy, and they must have really good communication with clubs to be able to go and sit in the room and have these meetings and get the types of deals and players across the line that we've seen in the last 18 months. It's remarkable for me to see that this one actually came across the line. I did say as well, perhaps more interestingly, that he joins a unique group of players that have played for Liverpool, Leipzig and Hull City, and the other one was Peter Golaski.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing, is obviously Seri and Morden had a word to him, but I wonder if Golaski, as a former teammate at that point in Leipzig, might have also had a chat to him. Obviously, he hasn't been a City player for quite some time, but I did say that. Yeah, the quote, I don't know what show it's from, but the whole it's unusual that it's happened twice, sort of thing, which isn't that many, but it's unusual that it's happened twice. I quite like that. So a very funny one. And as you say, it's the signal of intent. And you look at another player that we'll talk about now as well, Manuel Benson at Burnley, where I think we touched on him before on the podcast as verbal agreement with Burnley, but not necessarily with the player, who's kind of keeping his options open at this stage. But things like this actually can help in getting those players across the line, because I'm sure for him looking at City now, he goes, well, hang on, like, they've got Carvalho in from Liverpool. They actually mean business. They're actually looking to push into the playoffs and beyond, rather than, if Carvalho had gone elsewhere and we're sort of sitting there kind of running through our options, trying to bring someone in, and he looks at us and goes, well, they're getting a bit desperate. What's going on there? I don't really want to go there. It can have a huge say in the sorts of players that we bring in for the rest of the window.
Absolutely. And if you think about that, being a Premier League player, coming back to playing in the Championship, because a lot of them aren't getting minutes necessarily in the first team for their Premier League clubs, but the best way for them to be in the shop window is to be part of a playoff, race. Like, it's either an automatic promotion where you're lifting a title and playing a significant role, or you get into the top 6 places and play some really big televised games where, much of the country and a lot of the world is kind of showing interest, and that's ultimately the best way to secure a Premier League contract as well. So I think that what I agree with in regards to if you were Benson and you were thinking, what club do I go to? If you do look around and see the players on paper and see the style of football that Rosenior has us playing, it's hard not to get excited and to go, as far as where my career's at, this could be the perfect move for me to be seen and to play a significant role and play with a team that is, pretty much rolling and seems to have a fair bit of momentum heading into the playoffs. or the latter half of the season. I think it's a bit presumptuous to say that we'll be in the playoffs, but the intent that that is being shown certainly reflects a level of ambition that makes you want to be a part of something, which seems to be what is being echoed by the players who are coming to the club.
And I guess with Carvalho and Benson linked as loans, it is also good to see. So Ivor Panda, goalkeeper from Croatia, playing at Fortuna Sittard, looking at joining on a permanent deal, looking like a fee of only about £1 to £1.5 million as well, which I think is a lot less than the Fortuna Sittard fans were expecting it to be. I'd sort of said, I can't remember if it was to yourself or Dan a couple of weeks ago, that my concern with this window was that we didn't spend too much of our budget kind of like putting all our eggs in one basket to try and go up this season, to the detriment of any transfer strategies for next season or beyond, and sort of harm our chances in those windows. So whilst I look at Carvalho as potentially a signing like that, where I don't know what the fee and the cost involved is, it's good to see a permanent signing like Panda, who's 23 years old. Definitely one for the future, but one for now as well. Sort of a long-term signing. As someone that strengthens the squad for this season, but also beyond. And whether he's brought in initially to challenge Allsop, but not necessarily replace him, remains to be seen. But that it's an exciting signing in that sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that the keeper issue is one that does kind of need solving, particularly if Rosenior is hell bent on playing the way that he has, or the way that he likes his keepers to play. I know Allsop was a bit of a head scratcher when he first got signed, but I think it's very clear to me that whilst I actually don't dislike Ingram as a keeper, it's very clear that he's not the style of keeper that Rosenior prefers. And so if you think that, or if he believes that that's a really critical part of how we're going to play, if Ingram's your first backup and Allsop gets injured, well, then you're compromising the style of play that you are hoping to. And I think that's probably why there was certainly a level of intrigue and it was proactive in trying to go and sign a keeper for a fee and have it locked in, is because he wants to really ascertain the style that we're hoping to continue playing. And if you don't have a keeping bench of depth that's able to pick up and continue to play that, once you have one or two injuries, well then, that's a huge hole in his system. So it doesn't surprise me, and I think it sounds like a very astute piece of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other position we're looking to strengthen, I'll sort of couple that with our discussion of our player this week being Ruben Vinagre. It seems that he's played his last game for City, only the 10 appearances out of a possible 24. So a reasonably disappointing loan spell from Sporting Lisbon. I think they're looking to send him back out on loan to Turkey or somewhere like that. And as a result, we're looking to bring in a left back. It sounds as if that would also be a permanent signing, which in a way I think is actually the right way to go. I mean, I was initially surprised when we got Vinagre in the summer on loan. And, I think we all saw that there was that option to buy for something like £15 million, which we all knew wasn't going to be taken up. So again, it's another one where you kind of go, it's good to have a hopefully long-term signing in that position just to lock that away. But on Vinagre himself as well, showed his glimpses when he was fit, but the issue was he just couldn't stay fit for long enough.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I do think as well that there was such a pressure that kind of came with him. I know that in our pre-season predictions, many of us expected Vinagre to be up in the conversation for player of the season, or certainly, our best pick. So I think that the fact that he did come with some level of hype around him probably makes the loan spell all the more disappointing. But I guess what is kind of, to the management side's credit is I actually like that we've decided to move on from him sooner rather than later. I think all of the comments that Rosenior's made in the press about Vinagre have been really respectful, and I think it has kind of spoke to the fact that Rosenior still values him as a player, thinks he still has a lot to offer. But for this point in time where we're at, it doesn't seem like it's the right relationship, and so to move on from him quite quickly, who is Vinagre is a name, and he's certainly well known. Is I think really smart and shows again the ambition. But instead of flogging the dead horse and going, oh well, that's a star that we've got on the books. We'll hope that he'll come back and do a role for us later in the piece. It seems to me like it's quite good business.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, well, we'll wrap things up with a preview of that Norwich game Friday night over in the UK, Saturday morning our time. We've had quite a lot of Saturday morning games recently, which I actually quite like. It's a nice 7 a.m. start to the day. It's not disrupting your weekend too much in terms of sleep patterns. Of course, played them on the opening day of the season and lost 2-1 with that very late, potentially out of bounds ball, giving them the winning goal with basically the last kick of the game. What I'll actually look forward to most with this game is, I guess, seeing our progress on the pitch, because casting our minds back to that game, it's probably the most... It was very reminiscent for me of, I don't know if you remember, like our first Premier League game under Bruce against Chelsea, where the first 30 minutes, they just passed us off the park and you thought, geez, this team's on another level to us. And it felt like that a lot with this Norwich game, where they just came at us with that intensity and tempo that we just didn't seem able to keep up with. And, yes, Delap scored against the run of play and got us off to a great start. But it seemed as if it was very much a team chasing promotion against a team battling relegation or mid-table in us, where our expectations would have been a bit different. And so I'll be interested to see now, half a season later, how much we've developed and, potentially how much they've dropped off, where the roles might reverse a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget as well, heading into this one, we're going to be without Philogene. We're going to be without Delap, who, if you had to kind of consider the team that, we're putting out, we'd have no chance against, to be losing like those two stars and still have to go and compete against the likes of Norwich. It's going to be a tough one. But I seem to sit on the same side of the fence as you do. I think the progress that I expect that we'll see from that opening day is a remarkable one. And I know that they've kind of had some patches of their own where they started well, I think died off, and then they've been pretty streaky when I looked at their form this season. But even though I would say that overall we've still had some really interesting patches of our own, I don't know if we're necessarily a streaky team. Like, I do believe when we go out and play that we are a chance of beating anyone in the championship on our day. And I think that's probably maybe the biggest air of confidence that I think rests with me is it doesn't matter that it is Norwich now. I think Norwich coming, to the MKM is going to be a really interesting prospect for them. And the way that they will view the fixture will be, oh no, we're playing Hull, who are another playoff chasing team, who have obviously, shown their ambition in the players that they've signed. And I think they're going to certainly find a very different City team from the one that they played on the opening day.
Yeah, I think there's only one win in the last 5 for them. They do have Josh Sargent back from injury, who I think when he went out injured was a big contributor to their drop-off in form. Rowe, who I think scored against us, I can't remember if he got the winner or their first goal, has been in terrific form for them as sort of a youngster who's come into their side. But as you say, I guess Philogene and Delap both missing for this one are 2 key players for us. But I guess the interesting one will be whether we see Carvalho from the start or off the bench. And I'd be inclined to say we might see him from the start, but it just depends how long he's been training with us, I suppose.
Well, I guess the other aspect of that is, one of the things that I love the most about the signing is that the main reason Liverpool was so keen on letting him come to us was based on the development of Tyler Morton, and they've been really happy with, the game time that he's been given. So I do think that, I know it's kind of soon. It has come at a good time where we have got, this mini break in the season. So we are able to get the deal done, and he does have time. Yeah, assuming he's fit, I can't see any reason why they wouldn't start him. A player of that caliber straight into the lineup, great for the fans. A great way to, introduce yourself to the City faithful if he is able to get on the score sheet against a Norwich side. So yeah, look, I'd be inclined to think that he does start, and I think that if he does, there will be a huge buzz around the stadium because of just the magnitude of a signing he is.
Yeah, and I guess the other player we didn't touch on with the Birmingham game was Billy Sharp making his debut. Presumably we'll see him off the bench again in this one. I thought he looked reasonable. I mean, given his age and I suppose spell in the championship last time around, I thought he looked, pardon the pun, but he looked quite sharp. I thought, his layoffs to Connolly, his positioning, everything else was really good. So you think you throw him on for the last 20 or 30 minutes in this game as well, that adds another dimension as well. I suppose the only thing really is when you think about sort of wide options for this game is you are probably leaning on someone like a Lakilo to go one side with maybe Carvalho on the other, or if you put in Carvalho through the center, you're looking at like a Twine or a Tufan. And you do sort of think it sort of highlights the fact that we're kind of lacking in wide players of quality at the moment with Philogene out and until someone like a Benson potentially signs. So I think that's definitely the weakness at the moment. It'll be interesting. I mean, whether you have like a Twine and a Carvalho sort of interchanging between a central and wide position, I think they can both play both quite well. So I think that's potentially what we might see, because I know Rosenia does like to have the players be a bit fluid. And I think Connolly up top has looked really good. He's actually been more durable than you'd expect this season. I don't think he's missed too many games. So he'll be leaned on quite heavily. And as you said, he'll sort of be wrapped in cotton wool for any non-essential fixtures like the FA Cup, but if he can find the back of the net, I think we'll be in with a good chance.
Yeah, I was gonna interrupt when you said Connolly's been durable, because it always looks like he's only a stiff wind away from being injured. It always hobbles around like he's been shot in periods, but always seems to be able to manage it and play through it. But I think that in the last few weeks in particular, we've seen glimpses of Connolly that really show why he is such a special player. And I think, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty sure he was my potential player of the season from the beginning, despite him not actually having officially signed at the point. So very good. I'm very glad to see the progress that he's making and the fact that he is, being able to chip in with as many goals. But certainly his role becomes even more increased given the sad to lap news.
Absolutely. And then the score prediction for this one?
Oh, look, my score prediction, I agree with you. I think that at the moment, the width is a real concern. But I do think that given the fact Norwich have struggled recently, I think the feeling of the new signings, I'm going to say, I reckon maybe 2-1 City.
Yeah, 2-1. I feel like 2-1's probably my most common scoreline at the moment as a prediction, because I don't have a whole lot of confidence in us keeping clean sheets. But I think I'm backing Carvalho to bag on debut, I reckon, is my big shout. And I could see a 2-1 win as well. So, it'd be pretty exciting to see that all unfold Saturday morning. We've got the Birmingham replay midweek next week as well. And then we'll be back here to chat all about that this time next week. So, look, until then, thanks for joining me, Logan.
Yeah, no worries, Alex.
There is, and thanks everyone for listening in. Until next time, come on, City.